Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us here today on the Egora Experience program. I am your host, Cezary Jurewicz. Today, I have with me Rosemarie Rajwant from the great nation of Grenada. Now, Rosemarie is an educator and a politician, and you have already been here on this show before, but for those who are seeing you the first time, please tell us a few more words about yourself, Rosemarie.
Thank you for having me again, Cezary. I am both an educator and a politician, and a few other things. The last time I was on the show, I discussed my idea on education, and today we're going to be discussing my idea on politics. And I do feel that the two are very deeply connected because whatever decisions are made for the education system depends on the politicians that we have in government and what their views are. So I feel that one way or another, we can't get away from politics. And this is why I transitioned from being an educator to a politician within an approximately 10-year period. So I'm looking forward to having this discussion and to really elaborate on the political situation here on island and how it affects everything, including education.
Yes, you did mention this before, and it certainly is a recurring theme because I agree with you that the two are very much connected. So I'm really excited for the discussion ahead of us. Now, for those of you who are new to the Egora Experience program, let me tell you real quick about what we do here. The International Logic Party has built a new kind of networking platform. It's called Egora, and it actually makes politics rational, efficient, and incorruptible. This thing actually gives ordinary citizens like us real political power. Through Egora, we can make our governments do what we, the people, need them to do. Now, on this show, we will be using the Egora to discuss some political issues and ideas that each one of us supports, and we want you to participate with us. So please register for Egora. The link is in the video description. Then search for both me and my guest, Rosemarie. And then as we're having our discussion, if you agree with our ideas, you will be able to support them in your own ideological profile in Egora. Here your voice has real power, and we want to hear you speak. Okay, Rosemarie, let's get started. We're going to discuss two ideas in the Egora, one from me and one from you. This time you will go first. So, round one. What's your idea?
Great. Yep. So my idea falls in the category of it's a national idea, specifically Grenada, because Grenada is my nation in Egora. And it's interesting that the first Grenada idea that I posted in Egora was an idea on politics and political candidates. So I'll go ahead and read it. And it's a pretty brief, concise idea. So for most of this discussion, I'm going to be elaborating on it and just giving more information sentence by sentence. Okay? All opposition parties and political activists should merge to form ILP-Grenada and offer the electorate a feasible alternative to the current administration. By encouraging voters to utilize the Egora platform, ILP-Grenada members will help to rewire the minds of citizens. The end goal is to build a healthy democracy on island, which will then serve as a model for the rest of the world.
Well, I can't support this idea because it's a Grenada idea. I think it's but yeah, I'm really eager to discuss this idea with you. So I just wanted to say that out there. So to anyone else who's not from Grenada, just hang in there because this is going to be fun. Go on, Rosemarie. Tell us more about this.
The idea is pretty much 3 sentences. Before I begin to explain the first sentence, I'd like to say that I developed this idea during the period when we were on lockdown, when the crisis had just begun. So most of my thoughts were on what's the best way forward for the island, like what is most important in order to get through this crisis safely with minimal harm to people. So the first sentence was that opposition parties and political activists should merge. That's the first phrase of the first sentence. So, um, the reason being that we pretty much have one political party in government in Grenada, and this was the case since March 2018, and it was the same in the previous elections. So we've had this one political party, the new National Party, NMP, having all 15 seats in parliament for over over 7 years. And before that, there was one political party in government, the NDC, and for approximately 3 terms before that, it was the NMP. So the NMP is a well-established government of Grenada. Like for a lot of people, the NMP is synonymous with the government. Now, I felt that the opposition needed to be strengthened, and I know that other opposition politicians felt the same way. I'll give you a bit of a background
Okay.
on where
I
I.
I just want to comment here real quick because honestly, when I first read this idea, I thought you were talking about. So basically, you have one dominant political party that has pretty much pushed everything else out to the side. Even the other opposing party has been pushed off to the side, and then you have all these other tiny fringe parties. Uh,
Right.
but yeah, basically all the competition to the main party has been pushed out, and so you're calling for all of these opposition parties. I thought you were talking about the main party as well. I didn't quite get that when I first read this, um, and so I thought that I'm like, yeah, that's never going to happen. But now I'm thinking like all opposition parties, and okay, go on because I don't know. I don't know if that's a realistic goal. I don't know if they have the vision to do that. That will be interesting to find out. So tell us more if you think
Right.
that's really possible.
This way because I felt like the government was managing the crisis pretty badly from the start, and I felt like the only way out of this crisis was for the opposition to step up and demand that the people also demand that the government steps down. And I mean, that's a pretty strong statement to make. So I'll explain it a bit further. Um, Shortly before the crisis, I was invited to participate in a meeting with an official from the World Bank, and I was given some documents to review before the meeting. And I was very alarmed at the high level of debt Grenada was already in then. Um, and at the time, no one predicted that this crisis would have been as bad as it was. I mean, we're fortunate in Grenada because nobody really died, but economically, the country is in a terrible state. Um, so I felt that the government had been incompetent all along, and they clearly didn't know how or cared enough to find out how to manage this crisis properly. And I'll go back a bit just so that you understand. Before the last election in March 2018, the government got reelected by um, letting the population know that Grenada had discovered oil and that they were the only ones who should be entrusted with the responsibility of seeing that the oil exploration and extraction, the distillery went well, and that was one of their major points for campaigning. And I'm pretty sure that is why a lot of persons voted for them, just because of the promise that there was all this oil wealth that couldn't possibly be managed by any other political party. On the eve of elections, the government got the unions to sign an agreement. Um, Whether the government intentionally misled the union leaders or the union leaders didn't read properly, that's debatable. But the agreement pretty much said that the government would pay a gratuity to teachers, I think, or all public servants. And so because of that, the union leaders sort of sold a big chunk of the votes, like all of the public servants, to the party NMP that was in government. So they won the elections. Fast forward to um, December of the same year, the teachers were demanding their gratuity and is essentially a better retirement benefit. And they took to the streets, and there were massive strikes, and the country was almost at a standstill. And the basis of it was this document that was signed that the government either intentionally worded in such a way that it would mislead the people, or who knows what really caused it. But it was essentially the supporters of the government demanding a fulfillment of their promises. And the country was at a standstill. Schools were closed for a good while. Economic activity was at a low. And it didn't turn out well at all, because the teachers went back to work. They had their salaries deducted for the strike period, so they were rather disgruntled on the job. And there was this work to rule policy. So they went back to work, but they did a lot less than they did before. So like all extracurricular activities stopped, sports stopped. So at the end of the day, it destabilized the education system a great deal, just because of the government and its terrible campaigning strategies. But that was in December 2019. None of the revenue from oil has been coming into the country. I think as far as they got, there hasn't even been any significant exploration, and the government is very tight-lipped about it. So I think people are realizing that they've been lied to, and this is not going to stop. Now, in the previous elections, the government promised all students tablets to use in schools, and a lot of people voted for them because of that. And to this day, they haven't really delivered. So I feel like, it's reckless campaigning, but for some reason, the people always fall for it. So I just feel like we need a better government. That's all there is to it. Like under the current administration, the country would just keep on declining. Like there's no way to have proper management and proper policies with the current government in place. There's no way to support them or work along with them, because they're just reckless. It's not like they're asking for help or willing to take advice. They're just being totally reckless. And that's my conclusion, which is why I feel like the only way forward is to offer a good team to the population to say that we can replace the current government.
I agree. As an ILP member, myself, and a leader within the movement, within the party, I agree that we actually represent a solution to the problems. Now the question is, so I mean, I agree with this idea. I think this is the right thing for Grenada to do. Actually, I think this applies to every country. Really, all the opposition movements should be uniting around the world as ILP. Now, will they do that? Mm-hmm. That's ultimately the question. By supporting this, I agree with this idea. I mean, I can't support it because it's a Grenada idea, but will they actually do that? Will they do that, and how do we get them to do that?
Right. So I think we agree on the second half of my first sentence, that the electorate needs a feasible alternative to the current administration. So the first half of my sentence addressed how we should develop that feasible alternative. Now, following the last elections in 2018, when the NDC realized that they won 0 seats, they reached out to several of the small parties that had formed before elections. So this last election was very significant in Grenada's history, in that a lot of small political parties emerged, some with 1 candidate, 2 candidates, 3, 4 maybe, but there were several, I would say approximately 5 small political parties that emerged for that election. So that was significant. Before the elections, a few of us small political parties did meet to consider merging. And at this point, I should probably add that I was the deputy political leader of Grenada Empowerment Movement. So before elections, we met with a lot of the smaller political parties to discuss merging. It was too sudden. We didn't know each other well enough as candidates. We didn't have the time to work out a mutual ideology. And so that collaboration did not go through. Um, and I would say that after the elections, a lot of the smaller political parties from then to now have since disappeared. Like, I don't hear a lot about them. But right after the elections, when NDC, the main political party, realized that they hadn't won any seats, they reached out to a lot of the political parties because they wanted to have one opposition voice for, the next 5 years. So it wasn't really an offer to merge into one political party. It was an offer to just merge as an opposition, just so that we all speak with one voice on matters of national importance. Now, that in itself was a little worrying to me because I thought, how does that work by the time we get to the next elections? Like, how do we campaign? We're going to have candidates for the same constituencies. So how do we collaborate for 5 years and then go back to campaigning on different platforms? When I was campaigning last elections, I certainly highlighted the flaws in NDC as well as NMP. So I thought to myself, how can I collaborate to support the NDC as an opposition? And obviously you're not going to say anything bad about them. And then on the eve of the next elections, how will I campaign? Will I only tell the people not to vote for the NMP candidate? So that was the issue. And even more recently, when we spoke about merging in various ways, it was difficult because none of the political parties had a structure in place for collaborating. We would essentially need to rebrand. I had jokingly told NDC that they could join GEM with and possibly, be under my leadership. That wasn't going to change. But I was happy to come across ILP because ILP has a really good structure in place for establishing leaders. So that's why, I don't only say that they should merge, but they should merge as ILP-Grenada because there's a really good structure in place for becoming an ILP member, becoming an ILP officer, running an ILP campaign in a specific country. And I felt that that would give all of the opposition politicians and activists a sort of even baseline to start from. Like we're not entering ILP-Grenada with our original positions in our respective political parties. We all have the opportunity to start afresh and to build our reputation as politicians to eventually get to leadership. So that structure within ILP is what allowed me to realize that this would be a good way to merge rather than rewriting a constitution or one political party actually giving up its brand to join another. I feel that if everyone rebrands, it would be a safe start. And I think it would also be a good message to the population that, we're starting over with fairly new ideologies rather than carrying over the ones from the past. So I really was pleased to realize that ILP-Grenada could exist as a fresh, good alternative.
Well, that's the thing. The International Logic Party, it's not based on any ideology. It's really a whole system of democracy in itself, and that's accepting and open to, well, not accepting, but open to any kind of ideas from any perspective, and then we find the best solutions that work for everyone. So I do think that this is the right move for the opposition parties in Grenada. Really, I think it's the right move even for the dominant party. Naturally, they're not going to do that. That's going to have to happen by their supporters, by their members shifting sides and moving into ILP and then they're going to be like, oh, wait a minute, where are all the people going? And so it's probably going to have to happen like that with the lead parties. Um, Good luck to you on getting the opposition parties to to see the light, to see the way forward. Um, but yeah, it's not just building a healthy democracy like you're saying towards the end of the idea. The end goal is, I'm quoting here, the end goal is to build a healthy democracy on island, which will then serve as a model for the rest of the world. So it's not just a healthy democracy, but it we're at a whole other level. We're really empowering people to develop themselves as thinkers, to develop themselves as philosophers, so that they know exactly how to hold the government accountable. They know exactly what they want. Well, maybe not exactly, but I mean, like within a certain within a good focus, knowing what people should be expecting from the government. And honestly, I hope that Grenada does serve. It would be an amazing achievement if Grenada did serve as a model for the rest of the world in that. So
Um,
I
I think
really
so.
love your call to action on that one. But yeah, go ahead.
And what's interesting in Grenada's history is that in 1979 there was a revolution. So for a couple of years, approximately 4 years, Grenada did function, I would say, as a good model for, economic growth and social progress. There was just so much in place for those few years, from what I've heard and what I've seen from all indications. The economy did pretty well during those years. The airport was built. There was a fair amount of agro processing. People were encouraged to eat local produce, grow what they eat. And I would say that during that time, Grenada was certainly a model, even for Grenada today. Like, if Grenada could aspire to be what it was then, that would be pretty decent. But I would say Grenada already was that model for the world and for itself in the past for a couple of years. So we know that it has the potential to return to that state. It's just a matter of getting people to want that enough to go for it.
You know,
So in my second, yeah.
from what I've learned from Grenadians is there was really a healthy, vibrant democracy happening at that time. Actually, I've heard some really cool stories about that, and it's really funny when you put it that way. That what Grenada used to be could serve as a model for the way forward. That's cool that a country can look back on itself and be like, remember how we did that? That was good. Let's do that again, because it seemed like it was a very politically egalitarian environment where the government was well connected with the people for a short time until it
Mhm.
collapsed. But
Right. And so that revolution represented a 100% change of government. That's the important point to note. A revolution in itself is usually frowned upon in the context of democracy. What I'm happy to know about this revolution that happened in 1979 is that I think one person died, but not really because of the takeover, from what I've heard. But it wasn't a bloody revolution. It ended in a bloody way, but the actual change of government was done with minimal damage, I would say. So although a revolution is frowned upon in the context of democracy, I would say for the years that that new government ran Grenada, um, everything about it represented democracy. I've heard people complain about the fact that freedom of speech was limited or that you weren't allowed to complain about the government, which I guess, was somewhat undemocratic. But the healthy democracy aspect of it was that citizens were consulted with for decisions on national policy. So I've heard that ministers of government frequently held meetings in their constituencies or in various communities to discuss plans and policies and get the people's opinions. Um, and there was just this open channel of communication. So the average citizen participated a lot more in the running of the country, and they were a lot more aware of changes that were being made at the level of government. So that in itself was pretty applaudable because nothing like that exists today where there's this open channel of communication between citizens and government. And this is where Egora comes in. And I mentioned it in my second sentence that if we encourage voters to utilize Egora, then, we as ILP Grenada can definitely rewire the minds of citizens. So I feel like the change begins in the minds of the citizens. I mean, as much as politicians are leaders and they're influential, the citizens, the regular voters, they make up the majority of the population. And I feel like it's very important to work with them and get them to understand that we need to have a more vibrant democracy on island and that they need to participate more. And Igora for me represents that the channel for citizens to express themselves and a way for us to see what the majority of people want, like what would make them happy, what policies they support.
Well, yes. I'd say you're right about saying in rewiring, because it's not just about people expressing what they want. It's about them really developing their opinion. It's not just about them expressing their opinion, but really grounding it in facts and logic and connecting it right. It's about really having a deeper, a more thorough understanding of things. We are really getting close to the 30-minute mark here. Like I said, I agree with you on this, but maybe we could just wrap up with some closing thoughts. What else? Anything else before we take a break for halftime?
Yes, I want to say that firstly, I believe that Igora demonstrates a really good way to rebuild democracies in this century. And secondly, I feel that Grenada is a good starting point, as you and I agreed on, because it's a small nation, it's a small population to work with, and it can definitely be a model for the rest of the world. But also the fact that Grenada had a revolution in the past, not really the overthrow of the government, but the way the country was run for approximately 4 years. It definitely was a success story. So I feel that, that aspect of Grenada's history should be really inspiring to the rest of the world for countries that want to rebuild that sort of government-citizen relationship with an open channel of communication.
Yeah, basically, we are trying to recreate what was happening, but make it sustainable, just make it so it does not collapse in case of one key figure. It was, I think, due to an assassination happening in Grenada that the whole system collapsed. But so it's not dependent on just one person. So it's not a fragile system. So it's continuing. It's basically an evolution. It's not just one lucky event. It's really a transition to a whole new stable equilibrium of democracy. And I call that intelligent democracy. So I think that's about all we got for round one. Okay, so we're at the halfway point of our program. We're going to take a break here and come back to discuss my idea in round two. So see you soon.
Bye.